Did you know Jack Daniel's employees get a free bottle of whiskey every month on payday? This tradition started over 100 years ago with Jack Daniel himself. He was known as the donations man because he loved giving back and helping people in his town. To thank his workers for their effort, he gave each of them a 375 milliliter bottle of Jack Daniel's Old No. 7 Tennessee whiskey on payday. That small act became a tradition. Today, on the first Friday of every month, called Good Friday at the company, every employee still takes home a bottle of Jack. It's not really about the whiskey, it's about appreciation. Jack believed that when you treat your people well, they'll give their best in return. Jack Daniel gave whiskey, but what he built was culture. Value your people. If you've been here before, drop a hashtag Believe in the comments below so I can feature you here in a future video. And if you're new, welcome to Believe Nation, the only channel that helps you believe in yourself daily, one video at a time. Believe. Imagine this. It's Friday, it's hot, you've been working hard all week. Your back hurts, you're tired, you just want to go home. You line up to get your paycheck. You open the envelope. The money is there. But then your boss hands you something else. It's heavy, it's cool to touch. It's a bottle of whiskey. You don't ask for it. It's not your birthday. It's just a thank you. This is not some made up story. This is real life. For over 100 years, the employees at Jack Daniel's Distillery have lived this reality. On the first Friday of every month, they don't just get paid, they get a gift. It's a tradition that started with one man, a man who was only 5'2", but had a heart bigger than the whole town. Most people know the whiskey. Almost nobody knows the leadership secret behind it. And today, we're going to look at why Jack Daniel gave away his product for free. We'll see how one simple act of kindness built a billion-dollar empire. And I'll show you how you can use the same secret to change your life. Let's dive in. The Good Friday tradition. If you visit the town of Lynchburg, Tennessee today, you might hear the locals talk about Good Friday. They're not talking about Easter. They're talking about the first Friday of the month. On this day, the mood at the Jack Daniel's factory changes. There's a buzz in the air. People smile more. They walk a little faster. Why? Because on this day, every employee gets a bottle of Old No. 7 Tennessee whiskey. It used to be that just the bosses got the big bottles, but now everyone gets a 375 milliliter bottle. It doesn't matter if you run the place or if you sweep the floors. You get a bottle. So think about that. This is a company that sells millions of bottles a year. They could sell these bottles for profit. Instead, they give them to their team. One employee said that on Good Friday, nobody ever calls in sick. Another employee mentioned that it isn't even about the alcohol. He said it's our way of showing our appreciation for the hard work they do every day. But this is not a new corporate perk. This isn't some tech company giving you free snacks to make you work longer hours. This started over a century ago, and it started with Jack, the donations man. So Jasper Newton Daniel, known as Jack, was a small man. He stood only 5'2" tall, but he knew how to stand out. He wore a long coat and a big planter's hat. But the thing that made him famous in his town wasn't his clothes. It wasn't even his whiskey at first. It was his generosity. In Lynchburg, Jack had a nickname. They called him the donations man. Jack did not have a wife, he did not have children, so he treated his community like his family. If a church needed a new roof, Jack paid for it. If a family was in trouble, Jack helped them out. When Jack died, they opened his safe. Inside, they found a stack of papers. They were IOUs. They were notes from people who had borrowed money from Jack. Thousands of dollars in loans. Jack could have collected that money. He could have taken people to court. He didn't. He kept the notes, but he never asked for the cash back. He knew people were struggling. He helped them because he could. This was his character, and he brought that same character to work. Jack knew that making whiskey was hard work. It required patience. It requires care. You can't just rush it. If your workers are angry, they will rush. If they are tired, they will make mistakes. Jack didn't want workers. He wanted people who felt like partners. So he started handing out bottles on payday. He was saying, I see you. I know you worked hard. Here's the fruit of your labor. Enjoy it. It was a symbol. The science of gratitude. Now, why does this work? Why does a $20 bottle of whiskey make someone loyal for 40 years? It comes down to a simple brain chemical called dopamine. When you get paid your salary, your brain expects it. It's a transaction. You did the work, you got the money. It feels fair, but it doesn't feel emotional. But a gift is different. When you receive a gift that you did not expect, your brain releases dopamine and oxytocin. These are the chemicals that make us feel bonded to other people.
It creates a feeling of reciprocity. Reciprocity is a deep human instinct. When someone does something nice for us, we have a burning desire to do something nice back for them. Jack Daniel gave his team a bottle. His team gave him their very best effort. Jack also broke the rules of his time. We have to talk about Nearest Green. Nearest Green was an enslaved man. He was the one who actually taught Jack how to make whiskey. He taught Jack the charcoal filtering process that makes Tennessee whiskey special. In the 1800s, a white business owner did not have to respect a black employee, but Jack did. When Jack started his own distillery, he hired Nearest as his first master distiller. He paid him. There's a famous photo of Jack and his team. In the photo, Jack is sitting next to George Green, Nearest's son. They are sitting side by side, not in the back, not standing, sitting together. In the South, at that time, that was unheard of. Jack hired based on talent, not skin color. He treated people like people. He built a culture where people felt safe. And when people feel safe, they perform better. I want to pause here for a second because hearing about Jack Daniel's inspiring, but I want you to actually use this. So if you want to take real action in this video, I made a free worksheet just for you. It covers the top lessons from today, gives you space to write your biggest takeaways, and helps you build a simple action plan. It's 100% free. Just click the link in the description to go grab it. I'll see you there. Your bottle of whiskey. Okay, so how do you actually apply this to your own business? You might not run a whiskey factory, right? You might not even have employees yet for what you're trying to do, but you have people in your life. You have a spouse, you have kids, you have coworkers, you have clients. There's people you have to be around every day. Jack Daniel teaches us that payment is not enough. If you just do what is expected, you get average results. If you want excellence, you have to give appreciation. You don't need to give alcohol, you need to give recognition. Here's the problem. Most of us wait for big moments to say thank you. We wait for birthdays, we wait for Christmas. Jack didn't wait for Christmas. He did it every month. He created a habit of gratitude. What if you did that? What if once a month you wrote a specific thank you note to someone on your team? What if you bought coffee for the person who always helps you out? What if you told your partner, hey, I noticed you did the dishes yesterday, thank you? It seems small. A 375 milliliter bottle is small, but over time, it compounds. Jack Daniel is not around anymore. He died in 1911, but his company is still here. His tradition is still here. People still line up to work there. That is the power of culture. Jack just didn't build a brand. He built a feeling. He proved that you can be tough, you can be successful, and you can still be kind. He was the donations man. He gave more than he took. And because he gave so much, the world gave him a legacy that will never die. So here's my challenge to you. Be the donations man or woman in your own life. Find one person today who deserves a bottle. Not literally, but find someone who deserves to be seen. Give them a specific compliment. Give them a small gift. Give them your time. Do it not because you want something back. Do it because it is who you are. When you treat people well, they give you their best. When they give their best, you all win. And congratulations, you're one video closer to who you're meant to be. Believe. Now let's learn about the Henry Ford disaster you didn't know about. Henry Ford failed 5 times before changing the world with the Model T car. Before the iconic Model T revolutionized transportation in 1908, Ford's journey was marked by flop after flop. Each failure could have been the end of the story, but instead, each became an opportunity for Ford to learn and push forward. This is the inspiring story of how Henry Ford turned repeated failure into world-changing success and what we can learn from his persistence. Try number 1, Detroit Automobile Company. First attempt falls flat. In 1899, with the backing of Detroit investors like William H. Murphy, Henry Ford launched his first car company, the Detroit Automobile Company. Ford was full of hope. He had quit his job with Edison Illuminating Company and was ready to build automobiles commercially. It didn't go as planned. The cars his team produced were expensive and low in quality, far from Ford's ideal of a simple, affordable car. Ford, inexperienced in mass production, also struggled to build vehicles quickly and cheaply. His backers grew impatient as their costs mounted, and the prototype cars underwhelmed everybody. Within just a year and a half, the Detroit Automobile Company collapsed. By January 1901, it was dissolved, having built only a handful of poor quality cars that were too pricey to sell. Imagine Ford's disappointment. His first venture, started with so much fanfare, failed completely. He had resigned from a stable job and staked his reputation on this company. Now it was bust. To the outside world, this looked like the end. Ford was left with nothing to show but the hard lessons of failure. But those lessons actually became invaluable. As Ford himself later reflected, failure is simply the opportunity to begin again, this time more intelligently. And begin again he did. Try number 2, Henry Ford Company ousted from his own company. Only a few months later, after his first company's collapse, Ford tried again. His racing victory in a 1901 car race where he drove a 26 horsepower car of his own design to beat famed driver Alexander Winton had impressed investors. Off the back of that win, Ford's former backers gave him a second chance. In November 1901, they formed the Henry Ford Company with Ford as chief engineer. This was essentially Ford's second startup, funded by Murphy and other Detroit businessmen, hoping Ford's racing success would translate into a viable car business. But history almost repeated itself. Ford clashed with his financial backers from the start. The investors, eager to get a product to market, grew frustrated as Ford spent much of his time tinkering on a new racing car instead of a marketable passenger car. By early 1902, their patience ran out. The investors brought in an outside engineer, Henry M. Leyland, a talented automotive expert, to oversee operations and assess the struggling company's value. To Ford, this was a huge vote of no confidence. He was angry at the idea of taking orders on his own project. After just a few months, Henry Ford quit his company that was named after him in disgust. It was a bitter pill. The Henry Ford Company had been named after him, yet now he was gone. Ford left with only $900 and the rights to his name, while his former investors kept the company's assets. Leyland, the consultant, took charge and soon reorganized Ford's second failed company under a new name, Cadillac Automobile Company. Yes, the luxury Cadillac brand was born from Henry Ford's second failure. Once again, Ford's dream of making his own car for the masses seemed to slip away. He was nearly 40 years old with 2 business failures behind him. Many people would have given up at this point. To the public, Ford looked like a man who just couldn't make a car company work. But Henry Ford did not give up. Ford knew that each setback taught him something. By 1902, he walked away with hard-earned knowledge. He learned he must retain more control over his vision and that rushing an inferior product to market, as happened in his first company, was also a mistake. These insights would guide his next moves. Try number 3, early racing cars speeding toward credibility. So after 2 pretty big failures in the car business, Ford chose a different strategy before trying a third. He turned back to building racing cars. If he couldn't yet mass produce a great car, he could at least prove his engineering prowess on the racetrack. Ford believed that success in racing would generate publicity, attract investors, and restore his reputation in the auto industry. Now, this was a pretty bold and somewhat indirect approach to achieving his ultimate dream. In 1901, Ford had already built a small race car nicknamed Sweepstakes, which he personally drove to victory in a 10-mile race against the country's top driver at the time. And that win did give him a burst of fame and helped lead the formation of the Henry Ford Company. That was his second company. Now, in 1902, after leaving that company, he doubled down on racing. So Ford partnered with famed cyclist turned promoter Tom Cooper to build an even more powerful race car. In a rented workshop in Detroit, they worked long hours on 2 sister cars, one red and one yellow, with massively oversized engines. Ford sunk his remaining resources and knowledge into these machines. The result was 999, the red car, and its twin, Arrow, the yellow car. 2 huge 80-plus horsepower racing monsters. There was just one problem. These cars were terrifying to drive. During testing, even Henry Ford found the 999 nearly uncontrollable, and he refused to drive it in competition. Instead, Ford hired a fearless young bicycle racer named Barney Oldfield to pilot 999. In October 1902, Oldfield entered 999 in a 5-mile race known as the Manufacturer's Challenge Cup and won in spectacular fashion, beating experienced drivers easily. The 999 car set a speed record on the Grosse Pointe track and made headlines. Suddenly, Henry Ford's name was back in the news as the builder of one of the fastest cars in America. The racing strategy paid off in terms of publicity. Ford's 999 became famous, and so did Barney Oldfield, but importantly, Ford gained the credibility and investor interest he desperately needed for another business attempt. These racing victories did not directly make Ford a successful automaker. Race cars themselves weren't a mass market product that he could sell, but they accomplished something that was super crucial. They proved Henry Ford's engineering skill to the world. He built a reputation as an innovator who could push the limits of automotive technology. And this reputation attracted the attention of potential backers who were willing to gamble on Ford one more time. Still, in terms of business success, this was not it. Racing was a stepping stone, not the end goal. Ford had won trophies and fame, but he still hadn't built the affordable, reliable car for average people that he wanted to build. The racing chapter did, however, set the stage for his next and most critical attempt at a car company. Try number 4. Another false start, partnership perils, and near collapse. Having all this racing fame, Henry Ford was ready to try launching a car manufacturing company again in late 1902. This time, he found a new primary investor, Alexander Y. Malcolmson, a wealthy Detroit coal dealer who believed in Ford's ideas. And together, they formed a partnership called Ford and Malcolmson Limited. Their plan was to build a lightweight, affordable automobile, essentially the car Ford has been dreaming of all along. And by early 1903, Ford and Malcolmson had set up shop in a small rented factory on Mack Avenue in Detroit, hired a few employees, including the Dodge brothers, to supply parts, and begun work on a new car model, which eventually was called the Model A. It seemed like Henry Ford's third try at a company might finally take off. But almost immediately, disaster loomed again. Ford and Malcolmson started building cars and ordering large quantities of parts on credit, only to discover that selling the cars was harder than expected. Sales were slow and cash was running out. By March 1903, the tiny firm was in a financial crisis. The Dodge brothers demanded payments for the first $160,000 worth of parts that they had delivered. Ford and Malcolmson simply didn't have the money, and for a moment, it looked like Henry Ford's third attempt would collapse before a single car ever hit the market. Facing ruin, Malcolmson and Ford scrambled to keep the dream alive. Malcolmson reached out to additional investors, including his rich uncle, John S. Gray, who was a bank president, to pull together more funding. And in exchange, these new bankers demanded a formal reorganization of the company. On June 16, 1903, Ford and Malcolmson was reincorporated as the Ford Motor Company with 12 stockholders and $28,000 in capital. This was notable because some investors still doubted Henry's business acumen. After all, he had already failed multiple times before. So they installed Malcolmson's uncle, Gray, as the first president of Ford Motor Company instead of Henry. Henry Ford was given the title of vice president and chief engineer. In essence, even in his own company, backers kept Ford on a short leash, reflecting the lack of full confidence due to his past failures. Now, for Henry, this must have been a pretty tense period. He finally had a company building cars under his name again, but he nearly lost control of it right at the start. The crisis was so bad that Ford Motor Company's bank account fell to only $223.65 by July 1903. It was literally on the brink of bankruptcy mere weeks after incorporation. And in a true do-or-die moment, salvation came from the very first customers. On July 15, 1903, the company's first 3 sales brought in much-needed cash. One buyer, a dentist, paid $850 for Model A and kept the Ford Motor Company alive. Those first few orders just barely saved Henry Ford's new business from collapsing like the last two. Talk about a nail-biting start. By 1903, Ford Motor Company had managed to produce and sell its first model, the 2-cylinder Model A runabout, and even paid a small dividend to investors. Ford's third company had survived its first year, a milestone he hadn't achieved before. Still, Ford wasn't CEO of his own company yet, and there were serious disagreements on the horizon among him and his investors. They had kept the business afloat, but the struggle for the company's direction was just beginning. Henry Ford had his own vision, a car for the masses, while some of his partners wanted to chase quick profits or cater to the luxury market. And this back and forth tug-of-war would lead to Ford's 5th and final failure phase before his ultimate success. Try number 5, early models before the Model T, struggling to find the breakthrough. Now we're in Ford's third company's early years. From 1903 to 1907, the Ford Motor Company produced a series of cars, models A, B, C, F, K, N, R, and S, in an effort to find a winning design and capture the market. It was a period of constant experimentation. Some of those early models showed promise, but many missed the mark. Ford was still learning what customers wanted and how to manufacture cars efficiently. It was a trial and error process, and the company was constantly on the edge of failure more than once during these years. For example, Ford's Model B, which was 1904, was an upscale touring car with a 4-cylinder engine, the most expensive Ford yet at about $2,000, equivalent to tens of thousands of dollars today. It was nicely engineered, but with that high price tag, double the cost of many competitors' cars, the Model B sold poorly. It simply wasn't the affordable everyman's car Henry wanted to build, and it didn't gain mass appeal. On the other end, Ford introduced the Model N in 1906, a much simpler, lighter price car around $500. The Model N was a hit. In relative terms, it became the best-selling car in America in 1906 because it offered a reliable 4-cylinder engine for a low price. This proved that mass market buyers were out there if the price was right. However, even the moderately successful Model N wasn't yet the car to change the world. It was more like a stepping stone towards Ford's ultimate goal. Meanwhile, a battle of visions was happening inside the company. Henry Ford believed the future was in cheap, simple cars for everyday people, but many of his early investors, including his partner Alexander Malcolmson and even Ford's president John Gray, they disagreed with him. They thought Ford Motor Company should produce luxury vehicles for higher profit per car. And under their influence, Ford Motor Company rolled out the Model K in 1906, a large 6-cylinder luxury touring car. The Model K was powerful and impressive, but it cost a hefty $2,800, which was a fortune at the time, and quickly earned a reputation as a flop. It was too expensive and not particularly reliable, and it strayed from Henry's vision of affordability. Henry Ford famously grumbled that he had no use for a motor car that has more spark plugs than a cow has teats, in response to the 6-cylinder Model K and the complexity that it represented. The poor reception of the Model K caused major friction within the company, and by 1907, Malcolmson, the champion of this luxury car strategy, left the business. He left, selling his shares and clashing with Ford one too many times. Henry Ford was gaining more control, and he was more convinced than ever that simplicity and low cost were the keys to the future. Through these years, Ford Motor Company had narrowly stayed afloat, but it was no runaway success yet. They were learning hard lessons from each model. Model A showed that a car could sell if priced accessibly. The Model A sold 1,708 units by 1904, which was a decent start. Model B and K taught Ford that chasing the high-end market was a mistake for his company. The Model N success taught him that the masses would buy an inexpensive, no-frills car if it was well built. And these incremental lessons, they were all pointing Henry Ford towards the solution. He just hadn't fully achieved it yet. By early 1908, Ford Motor Company was doing okay, but competitors, there were lots of them, and Ford still hadn't produced his breakthrough vehicle. It would be easy for Ford or his backers to lose hope after years of tiny results. It had been 9 tough years since Ford's first failed company, and even his successful company had come close to failing multiple times. But Henry Ford kept the faith in his idea. He once said, "If you think you can do a thing or think you can't do a thing, you're right." He thought he could despite all of the failures, and he was about to be proven right. The breakthrough Model T finally changing the world. In October 1908, Henry Ford introduced the Model T, the car that would change the world. This was the culmination of everything he had learned from failures 1 to 5. The Model T was designed to be simple, sturdy, and extremely affordable. It had a 20 horsepower, 4-cylinder engine, a standardized chassis, and was easy to operate and repair. Ford famously decided to paint all Model Ts black, at least for the first few years, because black paint dried fastest and helped speed up production. Every choice was about efficiency and reliability. Ford's focus on learning from past mistakes finally paid off. The Model T was exactly what the masses were waiting for. When the Model T hit the market at a base price of $850 and soon dropped even lower, it took off like nothing before. Ordinary middle-class Americans and even working-class folks could realistically aspire to own an automobile for the first time. demand exploded. Ford had to get even more innovative to keep up. He introduced moving assembly line production in 1913, which was a revolutionary manufacturing method that dramatically lowered costs in production at the time. And with the assembly line, Ford was able to constantly lower the price of the Model T down to $600, then $500, eventually under $300 in the 1920s, which created even more demand for him. The car was not just cheap though, it was tough, it was dependable, built to handle the rough roads of the era. Farmers, factory workers, families, everyone was buying Model Ts. By 1914, Ford could barely keep up with the orders, and by 1918, half of all cars on American roads were Model T Fords. Ford Motor Company grew into one of the largest and most profitable companies in the world, and Henry Ford became one of the world's richest men. The Model T's impact on society was enormous. It revolutionized both transportation and American industry, as historians have said. Cars went from luxury curiosities to everyday necessities because of the Model T. It was the car that put the world on wheels. Ford's success also transformed manufacturing globally. The assembly line methods that he pioneered became the standard in countless of other industries. This was the moment Henry Ford had been striving for all along. After years of being laughed at as a failure, he finally changed the world. So, was the Model T an overnight success? Hardly. It was built on 9 years of trial and errors. Each of Ford's 5 failures directly contributed to the making of the Model T. If Detroit Automobile Company had not failed, Ford might never have realized the importance of low price and high quality. If he hadn't left the Henry Ford Company, Cadillac might have kept him tied to a different vision. The racing proved his engineering and got him the investors he needed. The early models taught him what not to do and what to improve. The Model T was the product of all of that wisdom. Henry Ford himself saw this. One of his most famous quotes shows this lesson. Failure is simply the opportunity to begin again, this time more intelligently. The Model T was just that. Failure begun again more intelligently. It was the result of Ford beginning again and again, each time a bit smarter until he finally achieved success. Turning failure into motivation. It took Henry Ford 9 years to finally get it right, from 1899 to 1908. But when he did, he got it spectacularly right. All of those apparent failures weren't really failures at all. They were just his stepping stones. To the outside world before 1908, Henry Ford might have looked like a man who would never make it. He had 5 ventures fall short, 2 companies went under, 2 racing projects didn't directly pan out into businesses, and even his early Ford Motor Company models failed. But Henry Ford kept going. He believed in his vision of a car for every person and used each setback as learning. And in the end, that learning from failure mindset changed him and changed history. If there's one big takeaway from Henry Ford's story, it's this. Never let failure stop you if you're passionate about a big idea. Ford's story shows that as long as you learn and persevere, you might be one step away from your next breakthrough. The next attempt could be the one that changes the world. So, the next time you face a setback, remember Henry Ford, the man who failed 5 times but kept innovating and improving until he succeeded on a world-changing scale. Remember Ford's own words. Failure is simply the opportunity to begin again, this time more intelligently. Use failure as motivation to drive you smarter towards your goals. Keep going and stay true to your vision. And believe, you could be one bold move away from changing the world. Now let's learn from Jack Ma, the man who failed at everything and became a billionaire.
When KFC opened in Jack Ma's hometown, 24 people applied for jobs. 23 were accepted. Jack was the only one rejected. It wasn't his first rejection either. He applied for dozens of positions that got turned down from every single one. Instead of giving up, Jack taught himself English and dreamed bigger. In 1999, he convinced 17 friends to help him launch an online marketplace from his small apartment. That startup was Alibaba. At first, nobody believed a Chinese schoolteacher could build a global e-commerce company. Investors laughed him out of meeting rooms. He struggled to find any funding, but Jack persisted. He grew Alibaba through sheer determination, empowering small businesses to sell online. The platform exploded into one of the world's largest companies, and Jack Ma became one of the richest entrepreneurs on the planet, all from a man who couldn't even get hired at KFC. He once said, "Never give up. Today is hard, tomorrow will be worse, but the day after tomorrow will be sunshine." Early rejections and perseverance. Jack Ma's journey began with failure after failure. As a young man in China, he struggled academically and even failed his college entrance exam twice before finally passing on the third try. After college, he faced an onslaught of job rejections. Reportedly, 30 different jobs turned him down. He tried to become a police officer, but out of the 5 applicants, 4 were accepted, and Jack was the only one rejected. He even applied to KFC when it opened in his city. 24 people applied, and 23 got hired, everyone except Jack. To top it off, he applied to Harvard University 10 times and was rejected each and every time. Most people, they would have been crushed by a fraction of these setbacks, but Jack did not give up or let rejection define him. Each no gave him extra motivation to keep going. He later said that we have to get used to rejection and keep moving forward. This mindset, viewing rejection as a stepping stone rather than like it's the end of the world, became the backbone of Jack's success story. Learning English and seeing a bigger world. One of the first ways Jack turned adversity into opportunity was by teaching himself English. Growing up in Hangzhou, China, he was determined to learn English even though it wasn't easy for him. As a teenager, he would wake up early and ride his bicycle for 40 minutes to the city's hotel district every single morning just to find foreign tourists to talk to. For 9 years, he acted as a free tour guide for travelers, practicing English with anyone willing to chat. This dedication paid off. Not only did he become fluent, but he also gained a window into the wider world. In fact, one of those tourists gave him the nickname Jack, since his real name, Ma Yun, was hard to pronounce. Through these conversations and friendships, young Jack's mindset expanded. He began to dream beyond the limited opportunities he saw around him in China. An Australian family he befriended even invited him abroad, and that trip opened Jack's eyes to possibilities beyond his humble background. Jack eventually graduated with an English degree and became an English teacher in Hangzhou. His starting salary was very low, around $12 a month by some accounts, but he was passionate about teaching and learning. Still, he never lost the urge to do something bigger. His exposure to Western ideas and fluent English skills gave him the confidence to think globally, a rare perspective at the time. Jack often says this period of learning and broadening his horizons was really important to him. It taught him to embrace new ideas, to communicate more boldly, and to believe in himself even when he was just a nobody in the eyes of his employers. The spark of an idea, discovering the internet. Jack Ma's turning point came in 1995 when he encountered the internet for the first time. At the time, the internet was almost unknown in China. Jack traveled to the United States as a translator, and there a friend showed him the World Wide Web. The experience was life-changing for him. One famous story recounts how Jack searched for beer online out of curiosity. He found lots of information about American and European beer, but to his surprise, no information about China or Chinese beer. Sensing a lack of opportunity, Jack searched for general information about China and again saw nothing. In that moment, he realized that the internet could be a great equalizer for his country. Determined to put China on the online map, Jack and a friend created a simple website listing China-related information, basically an online directory. The site was very basic, and Jack called it ugly, but they put it up anyway. What happened next amazed him. Just hours after launching the site, emails started pouring in from people around the world wanting to know more about China and about him. Jack was stunned that in a short time, the internet connected him in China to opportunities around the world. This was his light bulb moment. He later said, "This was when I realized that the internet had something great to offer." So, motivated by the discovery, Jack started his first company, China Pages. It was an early Chinese internet directory for businesses. He had virtually no technology background and had to borrow money to get started, but he dove in anyway. China Pages earned a little money and taught Jack his first entrepreneurial lessons. But more importantly, it proved to him that China could engage with the world through the internet. The business wasn't a huge success. It eventually got overshadowed by a government-run competitor, but Jack gained valuable experience. He learned how to build websites, he learned how to persuade others to see his vision, and he learned how the emerging internet could empower small businesses. That spark was lit for now something much bigger for Jack. Building Alibaba from a small apartment. By By 1999, Jack was ready to go all in on his biggest idea yet. He convinced a group of former students and friends to join him in creating an online marketplace that would link Chinese suppliers with buyers around the world. Jack was now 35 years old, armed with conviction and the few connections that he had. The team, 17 friends co-founding alongside Jack, gathered in his modest apartment in Hangzhou to start the company. They decided to call it Alibaba, inspired by the tale of Alibaba and the 40 Thieves. Jack liked that it was a more globally recognized name and the idea of open sesame for small businesses. And in that tiny apartment, Jack delivered a very impassioned speech laying out his vision. He told his team that China's internet business could compete globally and that our competitors are not in China, but in America's Silicon Valley. That was a pretty bold statement at the time. Remember, Jack was an English teacher by trade, not a tech expert or some seasoned CEO. In fact, he didn't even know how to write a single line of code and had never run a big company. Many people thought it was laughable that someone with no technical background could start an internet company. But Jack had other strengths: charisma, vision, belief. He saw in himself not a programmer, but a leader and a dreamer who could rally skilled people to join his cause. So it was just 500,000 yuan, which is about $60,000 in pooled funds as startup capital. Jack and his small team got to work on Alibaba.com. Their goal was pretty straightforward, but ambitious: help small Chinese businesses sell their products online to the world. Jack was passionate about enabling the little guys, the small entrepreneurs, to find customers beyond their local markets. This mission would also help bring China's economy into the internet age. And those early days, they were pretty hard on Jack. The team worked out of Jack's apartment, often using homemade furniture. Resources were pretty scarce, and at first, even convincing Chinese businesses to sign up on Alibaba was really hard. The internet was new and trust was pretty low. Jack had to personally be an evangelist for the idea that online commerce could be trustworthy and valuable for them. He was reaching for a dream that not many other people could even understand at the time. Today is hard, tomorrow will be worse. Overcoming challenges. So just when Alibaba started gaining some traction, huge challenges emerged. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, many internet startups were failing as the dot-com bubble burst open. Money was drying up. Jack Ma, ever the optimist, kept his team motivated. He told them that even if the hype was fading, the dream of the internet won't burst, meaning he firmly believed the internet's long-term potential was real, even though there was short-term skepticism. Still, Alibaba needed money to survive. Jack went overseas looking for investors, but when Western venture capitalists literally laughed in his face, he was actually laughed out of Wall Street offices when he pitched his idea of a Chinese e-commerce site. No one believed that a small Chinese company led by a former school teacher could ever compete globally. But Jack finally found some believers. In 1999, just as Alibaba was nearing a breaking point, Goldman Sachs invested $5 million, and shortly after, SoftBank, which was led by Japanese investor Masayoshi Son, invested another $20 million. This was a huge turning point. $25 million in total funding gave Alibaba the lifeline it needed to continue to weather the storm and keep growing. Jack often says that perseverance is the key. If he had given up after those early rejections, the lack of funding, Alibaba would never have made it. So instead, he kept knocking on doors until one finally opened. With this new funding, Alibaba survived the early 2000s and started to thrive. By 2002, the company finally became profitable, but the challenges didn't end there. In 2003, eBay, the American e-commerce giant, entered the Chinese market by acquiring a local website. They were a global heavyweight with deep pockets, and suddenly Alibaba, especially with its new consumer-focused platform, was an underdog fighting against Goliath. Many predicted Alibaba would be crushed, but not Jack. He doubled down on his understanding of Chinese consumers and small sellers. Instead of charging fees like eBay, Jack made it free for users, which attracted millions of sellers and buyers who preferred a no-fee marketplace. He also introduced Alipay, which was an escrow-based payment system to build trust in online transactions. So buyers' payments were basically held safely until they confirmed receipt of the goods, which addressed the trust issue that foreign companies didn't quite understand. Jack's intimate knowledge of his home market and his customers first philosophy was starting to pay off. And over a few years, he overtook eBay in China. eBay was forced to retreat the company in 2006, defeated by this small local startup that just wanted it more. And a great moment came when eBay offered to buy Alibaba's to stop the competition. Jack refused to sell. He was in this for the long haul, not for some quick payout. Instead, he partnered with Yahoo. And in 2005, they invested a $1 billion stake in Alibaba, giving Alibaba even more fuel to grow. But through all these fights and battles, Jack Ma's guiding principle was to never give up and keep adapting. He famously said, "Today is hard, tomorrow will be worse, but the day after tomorrow will be sunshine." And he lived that quote. During the hardest times, when no one was believing in him, when he was running out of money or facing a giant competitor, Jack kept faith that if he kept going, the hard days and the worst days would eventually become good. And he was right. Jack Ma's triumph and legacy. So in the end, Jack Ma's crazy dream became an astonishing reality. Alibaba grew from that tiny apartment startup into one of the world's largest e-commerce companies. By the 2010s, it was a dominant force, not just in China, but globally. It offers services from online retail to cloud computing and digital payments. In 2014, Alibaba made global headlines with its record-breaking IPO on the New York Stock Exchange. Investors who once laughed at him now scrambled to buy a piece of Alibaba. The company raised around $25 billion in its IPO, which was the largest stock offering ever at the time. The former jobless man who couldn't even get hired at KFC had built a company so valuable that it shattered world records. Jack Ma instantly became one of the richest people on the planet, and his net worth was soaring into the tens of billions of dollars. But beyond the wealth, Jack was now hailed as this visionary entrepreneur on a world stage. He proved that an ordinary person, a man who started as a poor, academically average kid, could change the world through his perseverance and his vision. Alibaba's success also empowered millions of small business owners in China and beyond, fulfilling Jack's original mission to help the little guys benefit from the internet. Jack Ma's story has some fairy tale-like qualities, but he never forgets how it started, with rejection and resilience. Even after his success, he remains humble about all of his abilities. He often says that he was not a tech genius or a Superman, just someone who is willing to keep trying and learn from mistakes. In 2019, Jack stepped down as Alibaba's chairman on his 55th birthday to focus on his philanthropy and education projects, returning to his teacher roots. It's inspiring that after achieving so much, he still chose to give back and help others reach their potential, which kind of became a full circle moment for someone who began as a modest teacher with big dreams. So here's the moral of Jack's story for me. His journey from repeated rejection to crazy success shows that anything is possible if you don't give up. His life shows that you need to have grit and vision and self-belief. He faced more rejection early on than most of us might in a lifetime, but he kept pushing forward. He once said, "If you don't give up, you still have a chance. Giving up is the greatest failure." Jack really lived that advice. He met every failure with a new attempt to go again, every no with a new idea and way to get around it. And eventually, the man who couldn't land a simple job created thousands of jobs for others and built a company that changed the world. Imagine if Jack Ma had given up after that KFC rejection or the Harvard rejections. The world would never have heard of Alibaba, and Jack would just be another unhappy man who quit on his dreams. Instead, because he kept going, he reaped the sunshine he talked about and proved to all of us that we can too. To watch the incredible comeback story of Soichiro Honda, check the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there. Soichiro Honda, the founder of Honda Motors, was rejected by Toyota, lost his factory in World War II, and had an earthquake destroy everything he built. He was broke, humiliated, and at rock bottom.